Welcome to sleepy Japan. Tonight, we drift together into a quiet story from Japan, a tale shaped by stillness, tradition, and the soft rhythm of night. Before we begin, take a slow breath in and exhale gently. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your hands rest. Let your thoughts begin to settle as the world around you softens into calm. Imagine a peaceful evening, light from a simple paper lantern drifting across the room, a cool breeze moving just beyond the window. And in the distance, a single temple bell echoing through the night. Each sound carries you deeper into rest. There is nothing you need to do now, nowhere you need to be. Just breathe and let the night open gently around you. Feel peace moving through your body, from your chest to your shoulders, to the quiet rhythm of your breath. The world outside grows silent. Only the sound of your breathing remains, and the soft promise of dreams waiting to unfold. Now, as the moon rises above the hills and the night deepens, let us begin tonight's story. The Crackling Mountain. Long ago, in a time when mountains still whispered their ancient names, there lived an old man and an old woman in a small house at the edge of a village. Their home stood where cultivated fields gave way to wilderness, where the ordered world met the boundless realm of forest and stone. The house was modest, its wooden walls weathered silver grey, its thatched roof thick and golden. The old couple had lived there together for more years than either could count. Their days had taken on the gentle rhythm of water moving over smooth stones. And they found their happiness not in abundance, but in sufficiency, in the profound peace of simple things done well. But of all their blessings, none was more cherished than the white hare who had come to live with them. The hare had appeared one spring morning, as white as fresh snow on distant peaks, as pure as moonlight on still water. The old woman had found the creature sitting quietly at their doorstep, regarding her with eyes that seemed to hold more wisdom than any animal should possess. There had been no fear in those dark eyes, only a calm recognition, as though the hare had been searching for this place and had finally found it. From that day forward, the hare remained with them, becoming not merely a pet, but a member of their small household, a companion whose presence brought them joy that ran deeper than words. Each evening, they would set out food for their beloved companion, tender greens from the garden, sweet grasses from the hillside, placed carefully in a smooth wooden bowl the old man had carved himself. The hare would approach with a dignity that never failed to touch their hearts, eating slowly, mindfully, as though expressing gratitude for each blade of grass. In this way, the days passed like beads on a string, each one precious, each one containing its own small beauties. But there are forces in the world that do not respect such peace, creatures whose nature is to disrupt and disturb. And so it was that their tranquil life was visited by a badger, who lived in the wild places beyond their cultivated land. The badger was a creature of the in-between spaces, dwelling where the human world and the spirit world blurred together. In the old stories, badgers were known as tricksters and shapeshifters, beings of considerable cunning and even greater malice. This particular badger had watched their home from the shadows. It had seen the care with which they prepared the hare's food each evening, and something in its nature stirred a desire to intrude upon what they had made. One evening, as the last light painted the sky in shades of plum and copper, the badger crept close to the house. The old couple had gone inside to prepare their own meal, and the hare had wandered to the far end of the garden. The badger moved swiftly, devouring the food that had been prepared with such love and care, its eyes gleaming with satisfaction. When the hare returned to find his dinner consumed, he knew immediately what had happened. He went quickly to find the old man, tugging at the hem of his worn jacket, leading him to the garden. The old man understood at once. This was about respect, about boundaries that must be maintained, about protecting what was precious. The next evening, the old man kept watch. He sat very still in the shadows, as patient as stone. And when the badger came again, the old man moved swiftly. He caught the badger and bound it to a sturdy tree with strong rope, tying the knots tight and secure. With the badger secured, the old man prepared to walk to the mountain to gather firewood. He called to his wife, who was inside grinding wheat for their evening porridge. "I am going to the mountain," he told her. "I will return before dark. The badger is tied securely. Do not go near it." The old woman nodded, her attention focused on her work. The old man set off, his footsteps sure on the familiar path. Behind him, in the quiet house, the old woman continued her work, and outside, bound to the tree, the badger waited. At first, it pulled against the ropes in silent fury, but the bonds held firm, so it began to think, turning its cunning mind to the problem before it. After a time, the badger began to cry. The sound started softly, then grew gradually louder, more piteous. "Please, kind dame, please help me," the badger called out. "The rope is so tight, it hurts me so. Please have mercy on a poor creature who meant no real harm." Inside the house, the old woman heard these cries and tried to ignore them, but the cries continued, growing more desperate, until she found it difficult to concentrate on her work. She moved to the doorway and saw the badger slumped against the tree, its eyes brimming with what appeared to be tears. Her heart, which had always been gentle, stirred with pity. She approached the tree cautiously. "You must promise not to steal from us again," she said gently. "Oh yes, yes," the badger whimpered. "I promise. I have learned my lesson." The old woman's fingers began to loosen the knots, and the moment it was free, the very instant the last loop of rope fell away, the badger's entire demeanor changed. "Foolish old woman," it snarled. "You have freed me, yes, but you have also sealed your own fate." The old woman stepped back in horror, but the badger was faster. What happened next happened swiftly, in a way that shattered the peace that had reigned in that place for so many years. When it was done, when the old woman lay still and silent, the badger felt no remorse, only dark satisfaction. But the badger's cunning ran deeper still. Using dark powers that creatures of its kind possess, the badger transformed. Its body rippled and changed, until where the beast had stood, there now appeared the figure of the old woman herself, perfect in its deception. Then, wearing the old woman's form like a stolen garment, the badger dragged the remains into the house, to the kitchen where the old woman had ground wheat only a short time before. And there, with methodical cruelty, it placed the flesh in a great pot, adding water and fire, creating a broth from what had once been a living, loving human being. The badger stirred the pot and tended the fire, waiting patiently for the old man to return. And as it waited, it hummed the same melody the old woman had been humming, perfecting its terrible disguise. Meanwhile, far up on the mountain slopes, the old man was gathering his firewood, unaware of the horror that had visited his home. He moved through the familiar forest with practiced ease, his mind quiet, at peace. He had no premonition of disaster. But while the old man cut wood on the mountain, the white hare was beginning to understand that something was terribly wrong. As the afternoon wore on, he felt a growing unease, a disturbance in the fabric of the peaceful world he had known. The air itself seemed to carry a wrong note. He hopped closer to the house, his movements cautious, his senses alert. And as he drew near, he caught the scent of the badger, strong and unmistakable. But there was something else, something that spoke of violence and death. He crept closer still until he could see through the doorway. There he saw a figure that looked like the old woman, standing over a cooking pot, stirring its contents. But the hare's eyes were sharp, and his senses were not easily deceived. He saw the wrongness in the way the figure moved. He smelled the badger's scent beneath the illusion. And most damning of all, he saw what lay in the kitchen sink, bones, human bones, unmistakable in their terrible reality. Horror and grief crashed over the hare like a wave. The old woman was dead, worse than dead. Her body had been desecrated. The hare understood then the full measure of the badger's cruelty. This was not merely murder. It was a deliberate attempt to create a horror so profound that the old man might never recover from it. For a long moment, the hare remained frozen. Then, with great effort, he pulled himself back from despair and began to think. He could not undo what had been done, but he could try to warn the old man, could try to prevent the final cruelty. The hare turned and ran, racing up the mountain path on swift feet, driven by desperate urgency. At last, he found the old man on a high slope. The hare burst from the undergrowth, chittering urgently, running in circles around the old man's feet, trying every way he knew to communicate danger. The old man knelt to the ground. "What is it, my friend?" he asked softly. "What has alarmed you so?" The hare tried to make him understand, but the old man could not grasp the full measure of the disaster. "I must go home," he said gently. "Whatever has happened, I must see to it." The hare followed as the old man began the descent, his steps quickening with worry. As they drew near, they could see light glowing in the windows. Everything appeared normal, peaceful. The old man approached the door. "I'm home," he announced, his voice warm. The figure inside turned toward the door with a smile. "Welcome home," it said in the old woman's voice. "You must be hungry. I've made such a nice broth for your supper." The old man entered and sat down at the low table. The false woman placed the bowl before him. The hare, from his place in the shadows, watched in silent agony. All he could do was watch and remember, and begin to plan his revenge. The old man lifted the bowl to his lips and ate with real appetite. "This is wonderful," he said. "The flavour is extraordinary." The false woman watched him eat, eyes gleaming with barely suppressed triumph. And when the bowl was nearly empty, the badger could contain itself no longer. The form began to shift and change, until the badger stood revealed in its true shape. "Foolish old man," it cried out. "Do you know what you've just eaten? That wasn't badger meat. It was your wife's flesh. I killed her while you were away. I cooked her body into broth, and you ate every drop." The badger gestured toward the kitchen sink. "Look there if you doubt me. See what remains of the one you loved." With those words, the badger fled into the night, its laughter echoing back through the darkness. The old man sat frozen, his mind unable to process what he had just heard. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward the kitchen sink. And when he saw what lay there, when the full weight of the truth crashed down upon him, something broke inside his chest. A sound rose from his throat, part moan, part wail, a sound of such pure anguish that the very air seemed to vibrate with it. He sank to the floor, his hands pressed against his face, and wept as he had never wept before. The hare crept close and pressed himself against the old man's side, offering what comfort he could. They remained that way for a long time, while the night deepened outside. But gradually, the old man became aware of the hare's presence. He reached down and touched the soft white fur. And the hare looked up at the old man with eyes that held not just grief, but also determination, resolve, the promise of justice yet to come. In that moment, without words, an understanding passed between them. The badger had committed a crime that could not be forgiven. But the creature that had caused this suffering could be made to answer for it. The hare moved to the door and looked back. And in that look was a clear message. I will avenge her. Justice will be served. The old man nodded slowly, and in his understanding came the first small measure of relief, enough to breathe, enough to continue. The hare slipped out into the night, his white form disappearing into the darkness like a ghost. The hare moved through the mountain forest with swift purpose, searching for the trail of the creature he now hunted. It did not take him long to find it. The badger had fled in such triumph that it had given no thought to covering its tracks. The hare followed that trail with patient determination. He was in no hurry now. Revenge need not be swift. It need only be certain. He climbed higher into the mountains, into wilder country where humans rarely ventured. At last, as the first grey light of dawn touched the eastern sky, he found the badger's den, a dark opening between twisted roots. But the badger was not inside. It was out in the open, collecting firewood, gathering dead branches into a bundle that it carried on its back. The hare watched from concealment, waiting for the right moment, and as he watched, an idea began to form in his mind. The hare gathered a few small twigs. Then, striking flint against stone, he created a spark. The spark caught in the dry tinder, a small flame that grew quickly. The hare crept closer, moving with perfect silence, and when he was close enough, he carefully transferred the growing flame to the bundle on the badger's back. At first, the fire was small, but fire grows swiftly, and soon the wood began to crackle and snap. The badger called out in puzzlement, "What is that noise? What makes such a crackling sound?" The hare called out in reply, his voice calm and innocent. "Oh, that. This place is called the Crackling Mountain. That's just the normal sound here. There's nothing to worry about." The badger continued its work, unaware that the fire on its back was growing stronger. And as the flames grew higher, they made a different sound, a sharp, popping sound. Pop, pop, pop. The badger called out again with concern. "What is that sound now? That popping noise?" The hare called back with the same calm assurance. "Oh, that's nothing to worry about either. This part of the mountain is called the Pop-Pop Mountain. Quite normal, really." But even as he spoke, the flames were growing fierce. Finally, the badger began to feel it. The heat suddenly became searing, agonizing. With a howl of pain, the badger realized what was happening. It dropped its burden and ran, seeking water. There was a small river not far away. The badger reached it and threw itself into the stream, with a hiss of steam and a cry of mingled relief and agony. The water extinguished the flames, but the damage was done. The badger's back was burned terribly, the skin beneath charred and blackened. The hare approached the riverbank and looked down at his enemy, with eyes that held no pity, only cold satisfaction. But he was not finished. The hare returned to the forest and gathered certain herbs and plants. Among them was cayenne pepper. He crushed these plants together, mixing them into a paste that appeared medicinal. Then he carried this preparation back to the riverbank. "Oh my," the hare said, approaching with false concern. "What a terrible accident. Here, let me help. I have knowledge of healing herbs. I can make the pain go away." The badger, through its haze of agony, was too desperate for relief to be suspicious. "Please," it whimpered, "the pain is unbearable." The hare began to apply his preparation to the badger's burned back, spreading it gently across the blackened flesh. For a moment, the coolness brought relief, but then the cayenne pepper began to work, and the burning became 1,000 times worse. The badger's howl split the morning air. It thrashed and writhed, trying to wash away the burning paste. "There now," the hare said calmly. "Just let the medicine do its work." And then he turned and walked away, returning to the old man's house. The days that followed were difficult ones for the old man. He buried what remained of his wife beneath a cherry tree. That had been her favourite. The hare remained close to him, a constant presence. Meanwhile, the badger suffered, but gradually the pain became bearable and the wounds began to heal. And as the badger healed, its rage grew. When it was well enough to move, the badger went looking for the hare. At last, it found the hare at the edge of the river, but now the hare was building a boat, a small vessel constructed from planks of cedar wood. The badger approached cautiously. "What are you doing, Mr. Hare?" it asked. The hare looked up. "I'm building this boat because I'm planning a journey. I'm going to travel to the capital of the moon." The badger blinked in confusion. The capital of the moon? The hare gestured upward. "Haven't you heard the old stories? The moon is the ancestral home of all hares. Would you like to come with me?" The badger remembered the Crackling Mountain, the burning. "I think not," it said coldly. The hare shrugged. "But if you change your mind, you'll need your own boat." This stirred something in the badger's mind. Perhaps this was an opportunity to catch the hare on the water, where he would be vulnerable. "Perhaps I will build my own boat," the badger said thoughtfully. The badger looked around and saw a thick deposit of clay at the water's edge. "I'll build mine from clay," it announced. The hare's eyes gleamed, but the badger noticed nothing. And so the badger set to work, moulding clay into the shape of a boat. Within a few hours, it had constructed a vessel. The next morning, both boats were ready. "Shall we go together?" the hare suggested. The badger agreed. They carried their boats to the water's edge and set them afloat. The hare's wooden vessel sat firm and stable. The badger's clay boat also floated, though it rode lower in the water. For a time, both boats drifted peacefully downstream. The morning sun sparkled on the river's surface. But as they travelled, something began to go wrong with the badger's boat. At first, it was barely noticeable, a slight softening of the clay, but water is patient and persistent. The river water began to seep into the clay, began to dissolve the bonds, began to weaken the entire structure. The sides began to sag. Small pieces began to break away. The badger felt alarm begin to replace thoughts of revenge. "Mr. Hare," it called out, "my boat seems to be having some difficulties." The hare looked back with false concern. "Having problems, that's unfortunate, but we're quite far from shore now." More clay broke away, and now water was actively flowing in. "It's dissolving," the badger said, its voice rising with genuine fear. "Help me. Please help me." The hare turned his boat closer, but instead of offering assistance, he raised his paddle high above his head. "Help you," the hare said, and now his voice was cold, hard. "Help you? After what you did to her? After what you made him eat?" The paddle came down like an axe. The impact shattered the already weakening structure. "You thought you could escape justice," the hare said, bringing the paddle down again and again. "But some crimes are so terrible that the very universe demands payment." Another blow, and another, and the boat was now barely more than fragments. "Please," the badger cried, its arrogance completely gone. "Please, I'm sorry." "Sorry?" The hare's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Every action you took was deliberate, calculated, cruel." The final blow fell, and the clay boat disintegrated completely. The badger plunged into the water, thrashing, trying to swim, but the hare was not finished. He maneuvered his boat close and brought the paddle down again, striking, driving the badger under the surface, holding it there. The badger fought with the desperation of a creature that suddenly understands it is going to die. But the hare was relentless. Every time the badger surfaced, the paddle came down again. And at last, the struggling ceased. The badger's body went limp in the water, floating for a moment, before the current caught it and carried it downstream. The hare watched it go, watched until there was nothing left to see but water and sky. Then he turned his boat toward shore, bringing himself back to land, back to the house where the old man waited. The walk back seemed longer than it had ever seemed before. The hare felt a deep weariness of spirit. He had taken a life, had killed with deliberation and purpose. But as he approached the house and saw the old man sitting on the doorstep, saw the way his face lit up with hope, the weight lifted slightly. The old man said nothing, but his eyes asked the question, and the hare's steady gaze provided the answer. It is done. Justice has been served. The old man's shoulders straightened slightly. He reached down and gathered the white hare into his arms, holding him close. They remained that way for a long time as the sun moved across the sky. In the days and weeks that followed, something slowly began to shift in the old man's heart. The raw agony of his loss began to transform into something different, not less painful, but less consuming. He could think of his wife now without immediately seeing the horror of her end. He could remember her laugh, her kindness, her gentle hands. The cherry tree beneath which she was buried began to show signs of new growth, and when, at last, the buds opened into flowers, pale pink blooms that seemed to be made of dawn light, he stood beneath them and felt something that was almost like peace. The hare sat nearby as he always did, his white fur luminous in the dappled light. "Thank you," the old man said softly. "Thank you for what you did. Thank you for not letting her death go unanswered." The hare said nothing, but his dark eyes met the old man's gaze, and in that look was understanding, was acceptance, was the unspoken bond that had formed between them through shared grief. The spring advanced, the cherry blossoms fell like snow, new leaves emerged, and the garden began to grow again. Life, which had seemed to stop on that terrible day, began to move forward again, not the same as it had been. Nothing could ever be the same, but moving nonetheless, continuing. The old man and the white hare lived on in their small house, where the human world touched the realm of mystery and spirit. Their days fell into new patterns, marked by small rituals of remembrance and care. Each morning, the old man would visit the grave, would speak a few words, would leave a small offering, and the hare would accompany him. Each evening, the old man would prepare food with the same care, maintaining that small ritual of hospitality and affection. In this way, they found a new kind of peace, built not on the absence of pain, but on the acceptance of it, not on forgetting, but on living with memory. The village people regarded the old man with sympathy, and the white hare with reverent awe. They knew that the hare was no ordinary creature, that he had served as an instrument of justice. Children who passed would stop and look for the white hare, and if they were lucky enough to see him, they would bow slightly, understanding that some creatures occupy a space between the ordinary and the sacred. The seasons turned. Summer came, autumn with its harvest, winter with its snow, and each spring, the cherry tree bloomed again, its flowers opening like countless small promises that life continues, that beauty returns, that the world still contains grace. The old man grew older, his hair turning completely white, but he remained gentle, remained kind, and the grief that had nearly destroyed him had instead made him wiser. And through all those years, the white hare remained with him. They were bound together by what they had survived, by what they had lost, by what they had done in the name of justice and love. The story of the old man and the hare and the badger became one of those tales that is told on winter evenings when the fire burns low. It became a story about loyalty and revenge, about the wages of cruelty, about the fact that justice sometimes comes from unexpected places. But more than that, it became a story about how grief need not destroy us, how even after the worst has happened, there can be healing, enough to allow life to continue, to allow new days to be greeted with hope. And when, many years later, the old man's time finally came, the white hare remained beside him, a faithful presence to the very end. After the old man had been laid to rest beside his wife, beneath the cherry tree that bloomed each spring, the white hare lingered for a time, sitting quiet guard over the two graves. Then, when the spring flowers had fallen, the white hare left the small house and walked into the forest, climbing higher into the mountains where the villages ended. Some say he returned to whatever mysterious realm white hares come from. Some say he simply lived out his remaining days in the forest, becoming a story himself, a legend of loyalty and justice. But on certain nights, when the moon is full and bright, travelers in those mountains sometimes report seeing a white form, moving through the trees, luminous as moonlight on snow, present for a moment and then gone, like memory itself. The cherry tree still blooms each spring, though the house beside it has long since fallen into ruin, but the tree remains, offering its flowers to the empty air, to the memory of those who once tended it. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, villagers walking past will pause and look at that tree, and they will remember the story, and they will think about loyalty and loss, about the ways that love persists even through horror. And in this way, the story continues, passed down from generation to generation, but retaining its essential truth, that cruelty must be answered, that loyalty must be honoured, that love, even when tested by the worst the world can offer, has the capacity to endure. The mountains stand eternal, the river flows on, the seasons turn. And beneath a cherry tree at the edge of a forgotten village, two graves rest side by side, peaceful at last, watched over by the memory of a white hare whose devotion transformed him from a simple creature into something more, a symbol, a story, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there are those who will stand for what is right, who will love faithfully until the very end and beyond, into the realm of memory and legend where the best of us hope to live on. Rest now under the cherry blossoms, under the watching moon. Rest and be at peace. The story is told, the justice is served, the love is honoured and remembered.